Welcome to the Willoughby-Eastlake's Public Library's presentation of Tammy's Rose Gardening Series. My name is Tammy and welcome to my rose garden. This episode will cover tips on how to get your rose garden ready for spring and spring cleaning. These are the tools that you'll need to help with cleaning your rose garden. So you need your gardening gloves. You don't necessarily need one of these, but if you have one, it's a mat and it helps to make it more comfortable when you have to kneel down for a long period of time. There's your rake, your little spade, the Irish Spring soap to help with keeping the animals away from chewing on your roses and digging up your bulbs and chewing on the other plants in your garden. The rapid soil test kit, your shears, which I usually mark mine with a little piece of black electrical tape so I know which ones are for my roses. And then I have another pair of shears which I use for just using it for other things in the yard, such as like poison ivy or other strange weeds and that I come across, so that I don't transfer any of the diseases and so forth to the roses. You have your leaf bag to put the debris in. I don't personally use any weed killer on in my rose beds, but my brother does use some in the grass in the yard. If you do use the weed killer, you need to follow the directions on the bottle exactly the way it says, so that you know whether or not you can use it in with the flowers or with the roses, and that you apply it the way you're supposed to apply it. If you use something like certain weed killers such as like Roundup, that quite literally it'll kill anything that it comes into contact with. And so you have to be very careful about where you spray it, and that you don't accidentally get your plants instead. You have your rake with the longer handle on it to get into hard to reach places, and if you have a leaf blower, that also can help get into hard to reach places too, and can make things clean up a lot quicker. And if you don't have a leaf blower, if you have a shop vac, and again with a longer handle, that can also help too if you have like a large yard or again, trying to get into hard to reach places. And then when you're all finished, if you have any little decorations you wanted to put out, you can have some of these guys, and you can put these guys out when you're all finished to decorate the yard with. So let's get started. The first thing you have to do is take off the rose collar if you use them, and to take them off you just unsnap them and snake them off and pull them off like that. Sometimes if the plant is small enough, they could have just fit around like this, and then you could take them just straight off like that. And then you have to pull away the debris around to clean out from what was around the base of the plant and everything else in the bed. So you can use a rake, just a little bit longer, to take some of the stuff out. And depending upon how deep your rose beds are, you don't even have to go inside the rose beds. And you have to be a little bit careful not to hit your other stuff. And if you have the azaleas, it's important to get the dry leaves out from under the azaleas too. Because the azaleas, they get like this fungus stuff that they end up getting these gall things that ends up growing on them if you don't get all the debris out from under them. And then we'll use our little rake to kind of get in here in between here, since it's a closer area. to get the big sticks out. And then when we're done, we can put it in our bag. As far as pruning back your azaleas, you don't prune back your azaleas at this time of year. While you prune back your roses at this time of year, the azaleas definitely have flowers on them, and that you only prune back the azaleas at a certain time of year, which is right after the flowers die off, you know, in the early summer and the late spring. Then you can prune them back. But unless you see, you know, something noticeably dead on them, you don't cut them at this time of year. You can, you know, rake out the dead flower, the dead leaves under them and other debris, but you don't cut them, because you'll cut all your flowers off. So now that we're done cleaning out the leaves, we want to back on the dead parts of the roses that didn't make it through the winter. And a lot of people like to prune their roses in the fall, but I like to prune mine in the springtime, because you end up having to cut stuff back anyways, because there's certain parts that die off during the winter time sometimes. So on this particular rose, you have this part which has some discolored parts here, which you can tell doesn't have any new growth, compared to this part which does have some new growth coming on it. It has some green parts, and it has some little red nodules on it, like this part and this part, but like this part here doesn't. And just like here, this part doesn't have any new growth either, this part here. So we can go ahead and just like cut this right back to the stem, the main stem, and you cut it at an angle, and just like these parts. And even if you do have things that have some new growth, if you want to shape the rose bush, you can always cut off parts at this point now too to shape it. So, you know, this one looks pretty good, where he doesn't have like a whole lot of cross sections that are going to get into where they're going to rub against each other. Here, this one too is like a yucky part. So, and like this one back here, this one has like an old small flowers on it. Now this here is like turning yellow. So even though it has some new growth, the fact that it's turning yellow really isn't too good of a sign. You know, usually the ones that turn yellow a lot of times end up dying off. So we'll just cut that section off. And he has enough other parts, which are good. And like this all the way down here at the bottom. Cut these parts. There's like this whole part. And like this here, this being split open is kind of weird. So, you know, he has some new growth here, but I don't like how this looks here. So I might want to cut them off like that, just because that's not a good sign either. And since this is like where they're growing at, the time of year that's growing, they'll still grow new. They still have time to grow new growth. Now, as far as using the other shears, we can use that here on this growing through my fence from my neighbor's yard. Then you pick up your debris and you come over and we put it in the bag. And at certain times, as the leaves start to grow, you'll notice that with certain roses, the leaves will start off being like kind of red in color before they turn green, and that's a normal occurrence to occur with certain rose breeds. And again, it's quite interesting to see where others, you know, sometimes aren't so red before as they start to grow out. But other ones, it's almost like the whole plant has this, you know, like red flaming tone to it for a few days. to use the Irish Spring soap, we take the soap out of the container. And we take the butter knife and we just cut little chunks off of it. And you put it around the different areas of your garden. Where you want. And I put it especially out here along the perimeter. And that way it keeps the animals and the pests away. And the soap stays around for a while it rains, and you might have to repeat, you know, putting it out, you know, maybe like in a month and a half. But, you know, it's not like you have to redo it again like in like a week or so. You know, maybe just a couple times a summer. In order to use our rapid soil test kit, you have to read the instructions. And so it says that you have to dig 2 to 3 inches below the surface to take the soil sample. So we'll clear an area. And the spade's marked how many inches, so that should be good. And then for the pH test, it says to remove the cap, which we already did, and to fill the test chamber with soil. Okay, here you only had to fill it this far. And it says to cap it. And it says to shake thoroughly. And it says to wait like about a minute. So it pretty much looks like it says that it's like slightly acid. And then for the other tests for the nitrogen and the potash and the phosphorus, it says that we have to fill a clean container with a cup of the soil and 5 cups of water, and then stir the soil and water together for at least a minute, and then leave it sit for 30 minutes to 24 hours. To find out what the results are. And using the dropper, then you put it in the test reference chamber. So those we'll get it started and then we'll come back to them. So when we come back a half hour later, our potash test says that we have adequate potash in the soil. Our phosphorus test says that we're deficient in phosphorus in our soil. And our nitrogen test also says that we are deficient in nitrogen in the soil. So what can you do about it? According to the instructions, you know, they give you hints about, you know, how you can do things to adjust the different problems that you have according to the test, and that according to like feeding prior to planting, you know, it says that for the nitrogen you can use like nitrate of soda as far as fertilizer, and for the phosphorus you can use bone meal and triple superphosphate. So that way when you go to the hardware store or to any of the garden stores, you know what you need to buy in order to, as far as what types of fertilizer to add to the soil to remedy the problem. And you know, it's kind of best to do that like before you put down like your mulch and so forth. So because that way you don't have to, like, you know, you would want to work it into the soil, and if you already put your mulch down, then you're going to end up turning your mulch over into the soil too. And then if you want the garden bed to look pretty and to as far as the mulch, trying to use that as like a weed deterrent, you just that just kind of defeated that purpose. So so now we know. And at this point, if you wanted to, if you did have some rose food, you could put it out and so forth. And like you noticed, as far as cleaning things out, you want to keep the as far as like close to the main bulb area of the rose bush. You want to kind of keep that a little bit clearer so that doesn't get rotted away, as opposed to like most other flowers where you completely cover it up. This you don't want to necessarily keep all covered, and so it doesn't get super moist and so forth. You know, you can pile things around it out here, but this you want to keep kind of clear of things. And now that you're all pretty much finished, you can take your little lawn decorations if you have any, and you can go ahead and place them around. And now your garden's all set for the season. Thank you for joining us for this presentation of Willoughby-Eastlake Public Library's Tammy's Rose Gardening Series. Join us again next time. We hope to see you then. You can find more programs like this on our YouTube channel, WE Library, or on our library's website, we247.org.